I never thought I'd end up on a ranch. At 25, I was a city kid through and through, subways, coffee shops, endless noise. But something in me had cracked over the last year. A job I hated, a relationship that had ended in betrayal, and the suffocating feeling that I was wasting my life in a place I no longer loved. When the chance came to take seasonal work out west, I jumped at it. I didn't know the first thing about ranching, but I knew I needed space, something raw and new to strip away the layers of heaviness I carried. The moment I stepped off the bus, I felt as if I'd entered another world. The air was sharp, almost sweet, nothing like the exhaust and smoke I'd grown used to. The horizon stretched endlessly, painted with golden fields and purple shadows from distant mountains. It was quiet, so quiet I could hear my own thoughts, though that wasn't always a blessing. A few cows grazed lazily in a pasture, their tails flicking against the flies. My boots sank slightly into the dirt, and I realized I was about to learn what hard work really meant. I adjusted the brim of my cap, shading my eyes as I looked around, waiting for whoever was supposed to meet me. That was when I saw him. He rode up on horseback like he belonged to the land itself, rugged, broad-shouldered, his worn flannel rolled up at the sleeves. His jeans were dusty, boots well-worn, and a tan line framed the edges of his Stetson. He moved with a quiet confidence that made me feel clumsy just standing there. He swung down from the saddle effortlessly, tying his reins with one hand, and when he finally looked at me, his gaze was steady, unreadable, but not unkind. "You the new hand?" he asked, voice low and steady, with a kind of accent that curled words slow and easy. "Yeah," I said, clearing my throat. Yeah, that's me." The corner of his mouth tugged upward, just slightly, like he was already amused. "Name's Cole. I'm the foreman here. I'll get you settled, show you the ropes." Cole. The name suited him. Strong, plain, no nonsense. He turned back to his horse, patting its neck before leading it toward the barn, and I followed with my bag, feeling like a shadow trailing behind him. The bunkhouse was simple, 4 wooden walls, a couple of beds, a small stove, and a faint smell of hay drifting in through the cracks. He told me I'd share it with another worker who was out on the range that day, then wasted no time putting me to work. By noon, I was already sweating through my shirt, fixing fences, hauling buckets, learning how to stay out of the way of cattle that didn't care who I was or where I came from. My muscles screamed, but there was something oddly satisfying about it. Cole didn't hover, but he watched enough to make sure I didn't screw things up too badly. "Not bad for a city boy," he said when I finally straightened up, panting. His tone was even, but his eyes carried a glimmer of something between teasing and testing. I wiped my forehead and managed a laugh. "Don't sound too impressed." I thought my arms were going to fall off back there. That earned me a small, genuine smile. Brief, but real. The rest of the day passed in that rhythm. Me fumbling, learning, pushing myself, and him stepping in just enough to guide without coddling. It was professional, sure, but there was an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. The way he sometimes lingered before walking away, the way his eyes met mine and held a beat too long, as if he were searching for something he didn't quite want to admit. By the time the sun dipped low, setting fire to the sky, I was exhausted but strangely content. This place was hard, unforgiving, but it was already stripping me bare in ways the city never had. And then there was Cole, the cowboy foreman whose presence pressed on me like heat, whose voice stayed in my head longer than it should. Something told me I hadn't just come here to work. The first week on the ranch hit me like a storm. Every morning started before dawn, when the sky was still a pale smear of blue, and the air held the crisp bite of night. I dragged myself out of the bunkhouse, muscles sore from the day before, and joined the others in the yard. Feed buckets had to be hauled to the horses, troughs checked, hay scattered. I learned quickly that animals didn't wait for you to find your rhythm. They pushed, nudged, and demanded attention whether you were ready or not. At first, I felt like an intruder. My hands were soft, my movements clumsy. I dropped more than I carried, and more than once a horse shoved me aside like I was nothing. Cole noticed, of course, he noticed everything. "You hold it like that, you'll spill half before you get there," he said one morning, watching me try to carry 2 buckets at once. His tone wasn't cruel, but it was sharp, efficient. He crouched, took 1 bucket from me, and adjusted my grip on the other. Keep it close to your side. Balance comes from your hip, not your arm. I followed his instructions and, to my surprise, it worked. He gave a small nod of approval before walking off, and I caught myself standing taller, like I'd passed some unspoken test. That became the rhythm of our days. Cole would assign tasks in his calm, steady voice, then step back to watch. He never wasted words, but when he spoke, people listened. There was a steel edge to him, strict, precise, but beneath it I glimpsed a softer layer. When one of the younger ranch hands got kicked by a stubborn calf, Cole was the first to kneel, checking him over with surprising gentleness. His rough hands moved carefully, his words firm but kind. You'll be fine, but next time, keep your weight on your back foot. Don't let it crowd you. I started to crave those moments when his attention shifted toward me. Riding was the hardest to learn. I'd never been on a horse longer than a tourist trail ride, and the first time Cole told me to saddle up, I nearly laughed. You're kidding, right? He raised an eyebrow. You think you're gonna work here without learning to ride? You'll be chasing cattle before you know it. Get on. The horse snorted as if mocking me, and when I finally swung my leg over, I must have looked ridiculous. Cole stood there, arms crossed, fighting a smile. Loosen your grip. You're not strangling the reins. Relax. Easy for you to say, I muttered, trying not to slide off. He stepped closer, close enough that I caught the scent of sweat, leather, and something warm and earthy that clung to him like the land itself. His hand brushed mine as he adjusted my hold on the reins. The touch was brief, practical, but it burned all the same. Like this, he said, voice low, almost patient. The horse needs to feel you're steady, not scared. I tried again, focusing less on my panic and more on the way his hand had lingered. By the end of the hour, I was riding in awkward circles, and Cole finally let out a short laugh. Not bad, city boy. You didn't fall off. I should have rolled my eyes, but his laughter, rare and unguarded, made me grin despite myself. Days bled into each other, a mixture of sweat, dirt, and exhaustion. Fixing fences under the blazing sun, learning how to knot ropes until my fingers ached, dragging myself into bed so tired I barely dreamed. But always there was Cole, watching, guiding, sometimes teasing in ways that made my chest tighten. One afternoon, as we worked side by side repairing a section of wire, our hands brushed when we reached for the same post. Neither of us moved right away. For a moment too long, his fingers lingered against mine, rough against skin that was slowly hardening into calluses. When our eyes met, something passed between us, something I couldn't name, but I felt it deep in my chest. He pulled back first, clearing his throat. Careful with that end. It'll cut you, if you're not paying attention. But his voice wasn't as steady as usual. It was little things like that, the way he'd glance at me when he thought I wasn't looking, the way his tone softened when he corrected me, or how his hand sometimes rested just a moment longer than necessary on my shoulder when guiding me into place. I didn't know what to make of it, but I knew it wasn't just in my head. I came here to escape, to find something different, maybe even to lose myself. Instead, I found myself watching a cowboy foreman with storm-colored eyes and a smile he gave too rarely. And every day, the tension between us coiled tighter, waiting for the moment it might finally break. It was after one of those punishingly long days when Cole finally surprised me. The sun had set behind the ridges, leaving streaks of pink and gold bleeding into the horizon, and my body ached in ways I didn't know were possible. I was ready to collapse into my bunk when I heard his voice behind me. Got a minute? I turned, startled. Cole stood with his hands in his pockets, hat tilted low, expression unreadable. The other ranch hands were drifting off toward their cabins or the mess hall, but he lingered, eyes fixed on me. Sure, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. What's up? He jerked his head toward the bunkhouse. Figured you might want a drink. Nothing fancy. Just whiskey. For a moment, I just stared at him. Cole, the no-nonsense, always in control foreman, inviting me to drink with him? My stomach nodded with nervous excitement. I'd never seen him outside his role as the man in charge, the one who barked orders and kept everything moving. I tried to play it cool, though my voice came out tighter than I meant. Yeah, I could use one. Inside, the bunkhouse glowed dimly with lantern light. Cole moved around with the ease of someone who knew every creak of the floorboards. He pulled a bottle from a shelf, 2 chipped glasses from a drawer, and set them on the table. The amber liquid caught the glow of the lantern as he poured. "Hope you're not picky," he said, sliding a glass toward me. "After today, I'd drink anything." He chuckled, a sound low and warm that made me want to hear it again. We clinked glasses, and the burn of whiskey hit the back of my throat, sharp and smoky. I coughed, earning another half-smile from him. "City boys," he teased, shaking his head. "Takes a while to build up tolerance." "Guess I'll need the practice," I shot back, trying to hide my grin. We sat across from each other, the silence filled with the faint crackle of the lantern flame and the muffled sound of a radio in the distance playing old country tunes. The atmosphere was different, slower, softer, stripped of the rigid roles we played during the day. For the first time, I saw Cole not as the foreman, but as a man unwinding. He leaned back, glass cradled loosely in his hand. "Been working this ranch near 10 years, he said finally, his voice quieter than usual. "Started when I was barely older than you. Figured I'd save up, move on, maybe start something of my own. But you know how life is. One day turns into the next, and before you know it, you've stayed put." I listened, watching the way his eyes drifted toward the window, reflecting the dim light. There was something vulnerable in his tone, something he didn't show outside moments like this. "Do you regret it?" I asked carefully. He shrugged. "Some days. Other days, I think maybe the land's just part of me now. Hard to picture myself anywhere else." He paused, then glanced at me with a faint smirk. "What about you, city boy? What made you trade coffee shops and taxis for this?" I hesitated, staring into the amber swirl in my glass. I needed to get out. Everything back home felt heavy. Work, people, the noise. I guess I just wanted something real. Something that didn't feel fake. Cole studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Makes sense. Ranch'll give you that, all right. No room for pretending out here." We drank more, the warmth seeping through me until the aches of the day dulled. With each glass, Cole loosened, his words flowing easier. He told me about the horses he'd trained, about losing one in a storm years back, about the quiet pride he felt watching the land come alive each spring. His voice softened when he spoke of it, and I caught glimpses of a man who loved deeply, though he hid it behind a tough exterior. I laughed at one of his stories about a stubborn bull that once trapped him in the outhouse for an hour, and for the first time, he laughed with me, loud, genuine, unguarded. The sound filled the small room, and I felt something shift between us. The whiskey burned less with each sip, and the space across the table didn't feel so far anymore. I realized I didn't just want to see Cole as my foreman. I wanted to know him, all the parts he kept hidden, all the things he only let slip after dark with a bottle between us. And though I didn't dare say it out loud yet, a dangerous thought crept in. Maybe he wanted the same. The second glass went down easier than the first, the third easier still. The room blurred into something softer, less rigid, like the edges of the day had been sanded smooth. Cole leaned back in his chair, his boots crossed at the ankles, a half-empty glass dangling from his hand. I'd never seen him like this. Looser, slower, as if the weight of command he carried all day had finally slipped off his shoulders. "You know," he said, his words just a shade slower than usual, "you're not half bad for a greenhorn." I raised an eyebrow. Is that supposed to be a compliment? His mouth tugged into that rare smile of his. "Don't get used to it. I don't hand those out easy." We both laughed, the sound warm in the small bunkhouse. The lantern flickered, throwing shadows across the wooden walls. Somewhere outside, a coyote howled, but it felt far away, like the whole world had shrunk down to this table, this man, this moment. Cole refilled my glass before I could protest, his hand brushing mine as he pushed it across. The touch lingered just a second too long. My stomach flipped, but I told myself it was the whiskey. By the time the bottle was nearly gone, his usual steady composure was slipping. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes on me in a way that made my skin heat. His voice dropped lower, roughened not just by drink, but by something else. "Damn," he muttered, studying me openly now. "You're yummy." The word caught me off guard. I blinked at him, half sure I'd misheard. "What?" "You heard me," he said, his grin lazy, crooked. "Yummy." "Cute." "Too damn cute for your own good." I laughed, nervous and giddy all at once. "That's the whiskey talking." "Maybe." His eyes narrowed slightly, though the warmth in them didn't fade. "But doesn't make it less true." My heart pounded against my ribs. I wanted to ask if he meant it, if this was some slip of the tongue he'd regret in the morning, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I sat frozen as he pushed back from the table and stood. His boots thudded softly on the wooden floor as he came around to my side. Without asking, he reached down and tugged my cap off my head, tossing it onto the bunk. "Always hiding under that thing," he teased, ruffling my hair with rough fingers. "Knew there was something better under there." I swallowed hard, heat rushing to my cheeks. "You're drunk," I murmured, though my voice wavered. "Maybe." He crouched then, eye level with me, close enough that I caught the faint scent of whiskey on his breath mingled with leather and sweat. His hands moved to my boots. "Bet your feet are killing you." Before I could stop him, he was tugging them off one by one. It was such an oddly intimate act, gentle, playful, but charged with something heavier beneath. He dropped the boots beside the bed with a satisfied grunt. "There. Better." I stared at him, torn between laughter and something that felt dangerously close to longing. "You're ridiculous." "Yeah, well," he said, his voice dropping softer now, "you're too damn cute to ignore." The room seemed to hum with the weight of his words. My pulse thundered. Did he realize what he was saying? Or would he laugh it off in the morning, chalk it up to whiskey and a long day? I tried to remind myself that he was drunk, that this wasn't the Cole I knew, the strict, steady foreman who kept his distance and never slipped. But part of me didn't want to push it away. Part of me thrilled at the idea that beneath all that composure, he was thinking about me too. He reached up then, fingers brushing lightly along my jaw. The touch was fleeting, almost shy, but it sent a shiver down my spine. His eyes searched mine, not with the firm certainty he carried in daylight, but with something raw, unguarded. "I shouldn't," he muttered, pulling his hand back. His voice was rough, torn between restraint and confession. "Cole," I started, but I didn't even know what I meant to say. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. The lantern light flickered across his face, highlighting the lines of wear and strength, the vulnerability barely hidden beneath. I could feel the tension strung tight between us, buzzing in the silence. Finally, he pushed himself up, running a hand through his hair. "You should get some sleep," he said gruffly, though his tone lacked its usual steel. "Long day tomorrow." And just like that, the spell broke. He stepped back, giving me one last look I couldn't decipher before moving toward his bunk. I sat there long after, heart racing, the echo of his words, "Yummy, cute," looping through my head. Did he mean it? Or was it just the drink loosening his tongue? I lay down eventually, staring at the ceiling, every nerve still alive with the ghost of his touch. I told myself not to hope, not to read too much into it. But deep down, beneath the uncertainty and confusion, one truth burned clear. I wanted it to mean something. And maybe, just maybe, he did too. The morning light streamed through the thin curtains, prying my eyes open long before I was ready. My head throbbed dully, and my mouth was dry from whiskey, but it wasn't the hangover that weighed on me. It was the blur of the night before. Cole's voice echoing in my head, low and unsteady. "Yummy, too cute." His rough fingers brushing my jaw, tugging off my boots, ruffling my hair. Had it really happened, or had the whiskey twisted reality into something I only wanted to hear? I pushed myself up slowly, blinking against the brightness. Cole's bunk across the room was already empty. His sheets were straightened, boots gone. No trace of him. He must have been up before dawn, like always. Part of me was relieved I didn't have to face him yet. The other part felt a hollow ache at his absence. When I finally stumbled out, the ranch was alive with its usual morning chaos. Horses stamping in the corral, cattle lowing, ranch hands shouting instructions across the yard. Cole was there, of course, standing by the fence line, arms crossed, barking orders with that steady authority. He looked exactly like he always did, composed, confident, in control. If I hadn't remembered every word from last night, I might have believed nothing had happened at all. But when his eyes flicked to mine just for a second, something shifted. He didn't hold my gaze. He looked away quickly, jaw tightening, and went right back to talking to the others. The knot in my stomach tightened. All morning, I felt the awkward weight of unspoken words between us. Every time I tried to get near him, he moved away, assigning me to a different section, sending me with another hand to haul supplies, correcting me briefly, but never lingering like he had before. It was as if he'd built a wall overnight, and I couldn't tell if he was protecting me or himself. As I worked, I replayed the night again and again. The way his smile had softened, the way his laughter had filled the bunkhouse, the way his hand had lingered against mine. The words had tumbled out of him so carelessly, but I couldn't shake the feeling there was truth in them, buried beneath the whiskey haze. And then there was me. What did I want? When I came here, I hadn't been looking for this. I'd been running, from heartbreak, from noise, from everything I thought I hated. Falling for a cowboy foreman had never been on the agenda. But the thought of Cole, his rare smiles, his rough edges, his hidden softness, lit something in me I hadn't felt in years. Something real. Something dangerous. By noon, my nerves were shot. Every stolen glance, every deliberate avoidance felt like a tug of war I couldn't win. Finally, while the others broke for lunch, I found myself lingering near the barn where he was saddling a horse. The air smelled of leather and hay, warm sunlight spilling through the gaps in the wood. "Morning," I said, my voice casual, too casual. "Morning," he answered without looking up, his hands working briskly on the cinch strap. I shifted on my feet. "Rough night." His hand stilled for just a fraction of a second before continuing. "I've had worse." His tone was clipped, businesslike. I bit my lip, the words pressing against my chest. "Do you remember? Did you mean it?" But I couldn't get them out. His guarded expression, the way he kept his eyes on the horse, told me he wasn't ready for that conversation. Maybe I wasn't either. So I swallowed it down. The rest of the day dragged. I kept waiting for him to slip again, to meet my gaze too long, to say something only meant for me. But he stayed distant, his voice steady, his instructions clear, his walls firmly back in place. The man from last night, the one who had laughed, teased, touched, was gone, replaced by the Cole everyone else knew. That night, lying in my bunk, I stared at the ceiling again. The lantern was dim, the air heavy with silence. Across the room, I could hear his steady breathing, deep and even, like he had shut the world out. I turned over, my chest tight. Maybe it had been nothing. Maybe it was just the whiskey loosening his tongue, making him say things he didn't mean. But I couldn't forget the way he had looked at me, the way his hand had lingered like it wanted more. Suspense coiled inside me, heavy and relentless. Would we ever talk about it? Or would we keep pretending, day after day, until the memory of that night faded into something neither of us dared to claim? I didn't know the answer. All I knew was that I wanted more. And that scared me more than anything. The days that followed were the hardest yet. Not because of the work. I was beginning to find my rhythm with that, but because of Cole. He was there, always there, a steady presence beside me in the fields, in the barn, at meals. And yet he wasn't. He kept a distance, like a rope pulled tight between us. Close enough to see, far enough to keep me from reaching. Every time his hand brushed mine by accident, every time his eyes flicked to me and away, the tension coiled tighter. By the fourth evening, the sky began to change. Clouds rolled in heavy and dark, thickening like bruises across the horizon. The air grew dense, charged with that restless energy that always comes before a storm. We were out mending a fence line on the far edge of the property when the first rumble of thunder shook the ground beneath our boots. "Storm's coming fast," Cole muttered, scanning the sky. He tugged his hat lower and tightened the reins of the horse tied nearby. "We need to get to shelter." The wind picked up, whipping my cap nearly off my head. The cows in the pasture stirred nervously, huddling together as if they knew what was coming. We started toward the barn half a mile away, moving quickly, but the rain hit before we made it. Sheets of water poured down, blinding, cold, relentless. By the time we stumbled inside, both of us were soaked to the bone. The barn doors slammed shut behind us, rattling against the force of the wind. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of hay and damp leather. Lightning cracked, illuminating the stalls in harsh flashes. We stood there, dripping, catching our breath. Cole pulled his hat off, shaking water from the brim, then looked at me. Really looked at me. His eyes were darker than usual, stormlit, raw. For once, he didn't turn away. "You all right?" he asked, his voice low but steady. "Yeah," I said, though my teeth chattered. "Cold, but fine." He stepped closer, close enough that I felt the heat of him against the chill in my soaked clothes. Without a word, he shrugged off his flannel shirt, leaving just the worn t-shirt beneath, and draped the flannel over my shoulders. It was warm, still holding the shape of his body, the scent of him, sweat, earth, and something uniquely Cole. "Thanks," I whispered. His hand lingered on the fabric at my shoulder, fingers curling slightly, as if he wasn't ready to let go. When he finally pulled back, his expression was conflicted, like the storm outside was raging inside him too. "I shouldn't have said what I said the other night," he muttered, looking away. "Shouldn't have." "You meant it," I cut in, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. His eyes snapped back to mine, sharp, searching. The thunder boomed overhead, but neither of us flinched. "I was drunk," he said, but the hesitation in his voice betrayed him. "Maybe," I admitted, taking a step closer. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break through my chest. But it didn't sound like a lie. The silence stretched, filled only by the pounding rain on the roof. His jaw worked as if he was fighting with himself, then finally, slowly, he let out a breath. "You're right," he said, voice rough, raw. "I meant it. Every damn word. You drive me crazy out here. You know that? I can't stop watching you. I can't stop thinking about you. And it scares the hell out of me." The world seemed to tilt. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "You think you're the only one?" He froze, eyes locked on mine. "I feel it too," I said, my voice steadier now. "Every look, every touch. I've been trying to convince myself it was nothing. But it's not. It's real. At least for me." His expression cracked then, the wall he'd built around himself finally giving way. He stepped forward, so close the heat of his body melted the chill from my skin. His hand lifted, tentative at first, then sure, cupping my jaw the way he had that night, but this time, sober, deliberate. "You sure?" he asked, barely more than a whisper. I nodded, breath catching. "I'm sure." For a moment, neither of us moved, both teetering on the edge. Then the storm outside roared, and the dam inside him broke. He pulled me in, his lips crashing against mine with a force that stole my breath. The kiss was rough, desperate, tasting of rain and whiskey and everything we hadn't said. My hands found his chest, clutching at the damp fabric, feeling the solid strength beneath. He kissed me like he'd been holding back for years, and when he finally pulled away, both of us breathless, his forehead rested against mine. "God help me," he muttered, his voice shaking, "but I want this. I want you." The thunder rumbled again, but all I felt was the steady rhythm of his breath against mine. "I want you too," I whispered. And in that barn, with the storm raging around us, we finally stopped pretending. The storm raged outside, hammering the roof, but inside the barn the world felt suspended, like time itself had bent to make room for us. His forehead rested against mine. Our breaths tangled, and I could still taste the whiskey of his confession, still feel the heat of his lips lingering on mine. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The kiss had been wild, desperate, but now a softer kind of silence settled between us. His thumb brushed my jaw, slow, hesitant, as if memorizing the shape of me. When he kissed me again, it was nothing like the first time. This one was tender, deliberate, as if he was afraid I might vanish if he pressed too hard. I closed my eyes, letting myself melt into it, letting the rough edges of the world fade. His lips moved against mine with care, with yearning, with the kind of passion that carried more weight than lust. It was want, yes, but also something fragile, unspoken, something neither of us had dared name until now. When he finally pulled back, his eyes searched mine, stormy, but full of something I had never seen in him before. Vulnerability. "This isn't easy for me," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I've spent years keeping my head down, being the man everyone expects, the one who works hard, doesn't make mistakes, doesn't step out of line." His jaw tightened, but his hand stayed on me. "If folks around here knew, they'd judge us," I finished softly. He nodded, his expression shadowed. "Could lose their respect. Hell, I could lose the ranch. My whole life is tied up in this place." His words hung heavy in the air. I understood what he meant, because I felt it too. The weight of expectations, the fear of being seen, of being cast aside. My chest ached with the same dread, but also with something stronger. The realization that what had sparked between us was worth more than the silence we'd both been living in. "I'm scared too," I admitted, my voice barely carrying over the rain. "I've never done anything like this. I didn't come here looking for it." But my throat tightened, and I reached up, resting my hand against his chest, feeling the steady thud of his heart beneath my palm. "I can't pretend I don't want it. I can't pretend I don't want you." The words seemed to unmake him. His shoulders dropped, and for the first time, I saw his toughness crack completely. He leaned into me, his body heavy with the weight he'd been carrying alone for so long, and I wrapped my arms around him without hesitation. We stood there in silence, holding each other, the rain pounding on the roof like a rhythm only we could hear. His head dipped to my shoulder, his breath warm against my neck, and I felt the raw truth of him pressed against me, not the foreman, not the cowboy, but just a man aching for something real. "I don't know what happens next," he murmured against my skin. "Neither do I said. "But maybe we don't need to know. Maybe it's enough that we're here. Right now." He pulled back just enough to look at me again, his hand brushing wet strands of hair from my face. For once, his eyes weren't guarded. They were open, naked, full of hope and fear all tangled together. Then he kissed me once more, slow, lingering, almost reverent. A promise, not just a touch. In that moment, with the storm wrapping the world in thunder and light, I knew I was safe. I knew I was wanted. And for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged exactly where I was. The storm passed, but what it left behind stayed with us. The next morning, the world outside the ranch looked washed clean, sunlight spilling over wet grass, the air sharp and new. That was how it felt between us too, different, fragile, but alive. We didn't talk about labels or futures. We didn't even talk much about what had happened in the barn. But something had shifted, and we both knew it. Days turned into weeks, and in the quiet spaces between chores, our relationship began to take shape. We kept it hidden from the others on the ranch. Cowboys had long memories and sharper tongues, but in stolen moments, we built something that was ours. Sometimes it was simple, a brush of his hand on mine when no one was looking, or the way his gaze lingered a little too long across the dinner table. Other times it was bolder. He'd find me in the stables late at night, under the soft lantern glow, and pull me into the shadows for a kiss that left me weak-kneed. The scent of hay and horses wrapped around us, and the danger of being caught only made it sweeter. There were nights we'd ride out together after work, just the two of us, letting the horses carry us to the far edge of the property, where the land stretched wide and endless. We'd sit side by side under the open sky, trading stories we hadn't dared to tell anyone else. He told me about the father who had taught him to ride, and the weight of keeping the ranch alive after his passing. I told him about my city life, my failures, the heartbreak I'd run from. He listened without judgment, and for the first time in a long time, I felt heard. One evening, as the sun dipped low, we lay in the tall grass, his arm around me, my head against his chest. The steady beat of his heart grounded me, and when he pressed a soft kiss to the crown of my head, I thought, this is what it means to belong. Balancing our work life with our love life wasn't easy. The days were long and grueling, and we couldn't afford mistakes in front of the others. But that only made the small gestures mean more. The way he'd subtly fix my grip when I held the reins wrong. The way I'd sneak him extra coffee on the cold mornings. The way our shoulders brushed when we walked the fences, neither of us daring to step away. It wasn't perfect. It was secret, quiet, stolen. But it was real. And it was ours. It couldn't stay a secret forever, and eventually we both knew it. One evening after dinner, instead of slipping away quietly, Cole reached for my hand in front of the others. The bunkhouse chatter stilled for a beat, but he didn't let go. His grip was steady, his chin lifted with that quiet pride only he could wear. At first, no one said much, just a few raised brows, a few sidelong glances. But the world didn't fall apart. The ranch kept running, the sun kept rising, and little by little, the looks softened into something close to acceptance. Cole no longer avoided me in daylight. He walked beside me, shoulders brushing, his hand finding mine without shame. One night, out by the pasture, we lay beneath the stars, the sky wide and endless above us. The crickets sang, the horses shifted softly in the dark, and Cole turned toward me with a rare, unguarded smile. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me," he said simply, his voice steady, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. And under that vast, glittering sky, I believed him. Love had found us here, in the unlikeliest of places, and it was finally free.